It's important to remember that when The Apprentice premiered back in 2004, Donald Trump was a bankrupt punchline in the New York tabloids, a guy who inherited a real estate empire from daddy and then managed to lose it all. And that is until he was cast in The Apprentice by the producer of Survivor, all-around reality TV savant Mark Burnett. According to a fantastic new profile of Burnett in The New Yorker, whereas others had seen in Trump only a tattered celebrity of the 80s, Burnett had glimpsed a feral charisma. Burnett used that charisma to make America believe that Donald Trump was somehow an extraordinarily rich and successful businessman, an image that persisted to this day with disastrous consequences. The author of that new profile, How Mark Burnett Resurrected Donald Trump as an Icon of American Success, is Patrick Radden-Keefe, staff writer at The New Yorker, and he joins me now. It's a great piece of journalism.
Thank you.
Burnett is like Donald Trump in many ways, it strikes me.
I think that's right. There's a kind of simplicity. There's a confidence in your gut. Burnett's written a couple of books, which sort of, they're memoirs, but they kind of double as self-help books. And a lot of his advice is like, don't waste time on over-preparation, trust your gut, always listen to your instincts.
He's also kind of a con artist in the sense that, well, it's a fine line between good salesman and con artist. You got a story about him like buying $2 T-shirts and selling them for $18 in the Venice boardwalk, and like that's kind of his deal.
Yes, and this is how he started. He was a British paratrooper. He came here. He was actually came to the U.S. without a green card.
He was literally an illegal immigrant.
He was, and he comes here on a tourist visa, ends up selling T-shirts on the boardwalk in Venice, and by his own admission, he tells stories about buying these $2 T-shirts wholesale and selling them for $18, and then goes and eventually resells us Donald Trump, a guy we thought we knew, and sells us, something else altogether.
You talk to a lot of the people in that show who talk about how they all thought it was a somewhat preposterous undertaking. Someone has this great quote, and they says, he had just gone through, I don't know how many bankruptcies, but we made him out to be the most important in the world. It was like making the court jester the king.
This is a weird thing. So I talked to a whole bunch of people who worked on the show for years and years, and this was a theme that came through, was this idea that The Apprentice was almost camp, that the whole thing was kind of delivered with a wink, that the people around the show knew that Trump wasn't this big success, but that somehow the American people just didn't get the joke.
Do you think that's true?
I don't really buy it. So I went back and watched, I watched 24 episodes of The Apprentice. And I don't feel as though he's presented that way at all. I don't think there's anything campy. The whole thing is he's presented as this master of the universe. The whole idea of The Apprentice was that the winner gets to become the apprentice to Donald Trump, and that's positioned as, they call it the dream job of a lifetime.
But all the people you talk to who are closest to it view that as ridiculous. Like, what's so weird about this is what the show is portraying is that this guy's this brilliant business master, and literally everyone, as far as I can tell, who's quoted in the piece around it are like, this guy is ludicrous.
Everybody except for maybe Burnett. I mean, one of the riddles for me was this question of to what extent did Burnett really believe it? He tells this story about being this young guy on the boardwalk. It's a totally implausible story, but the idea is that a rollerblader happens by and hands him a copy of The Art of the Deal, and he reads it, and it changes his life. I don't know whether or not to believe this story. I talked to his wife at the time, who said, I don't remember him ever reading the book, but this is the story he tells, and he says he was inspired by Trump to become a businessman himself.
Reading your story made me feel like really our problem is that it's Donald Trump's all the way down. That there's a certain kind of like sort of, the feral salesperson, right? I mean, you compare him to the figure in The Music Man. Yeah. The feral salesperson, the con artist, the person who comes dancing, and that it's almost is kind of an American icon, right? Like no one ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American people, which is the P.T. Barnum quote. Like, that Trump is just the most extreme version we have of that.
I think that's right. And look, Burnett said at the time The Apprentice came out, he talked about Trump in these terms. Remember, Burnett, before he made The Apprentice, made Survivor. And so there's this kind of zero-sum ethos, this idea that in any interaction in life, it's you and me facing off against a table, and one of us is going to win, and one of us is going to lose. And that's everything. That's government, that's family, that's day-to-day life, that's business.
And there's no one in that article around the show who has any doubt that but for The Apprentice, Donald Trump is president.
This is something that they all said.
All of them.
And the interesting thing is that a lot of them toss and turn at night, thinking about
like,
this.
what if we robbed?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is from people who were producers on the show, to people who were editors on the show, to people who were involved in, various other capacities. Burnett seems to be the only person who doesn't do any of this soul searching.
Do you think there's a whole part in there about the sort of Trump tapes, right? There's like got to be like tens of thousands of hours, literally, of the guy.
Right.
There was, people have alleged he said racial epithets. He said other things on there. The Burnett and MGM have said we can't give it over. We're legally bound. What do you think about that? This idea of this vault?
Well, look, I mean, we know it exists. So when they made the show over 14 seasons with Trump, according to Burnett, they would shoot roughly 300 hours of footage for every hour they aired. So there's this huge, vast cache of material. MGM and Burnett say they can't turn that over. I think this is a bit of a sideshow. I don't believe that, look, I think there's a huge amount of material in which Trump clearly says awful things about women. I talked to a lot of people who told me that he did, and told me this on the record.
But we've heard that.
But we've heard that.
Right.
I mean, to the notion that there might be something worse than and look, even to so this question of whether there's a tape in which he says the N-word. There are a couple of people who said that they have heard of such a tape. I talked to a lot of people who essentially said, look, I would know if there was one. I hate Trump. I'd be the first person to tell you there isn't one.
There's always this desire for the silver bullet to slay the monster. As far as the president's concerned, I think that the vault is one of those.
But it's a loser. I mean, the crazy thing there, right? So The Economist did this amazing poll after Omarosa started talking about this, in which they asked people how they would respond. 70% of white Trump supporters said that you can be the president of the United States and use the N-word while in office, and it won't make you a worse president.
Patrick Radden-Keefe of The New Yorker, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.